All right, first off, it's pronounced Tonga, not Tonga. Tonga, like Tong. Second of all, we are back in Oceania. Why is Tonga so unique? Well, there's no country really like it. It's the last remaining indigenous monarchy in the Pacific. They had a thalassocracy. We'll talk about that later. Let's just start the episode.
It's time to learn geography.
No! Hey everybody, get your Geography Now merch at geographynow.com. It's not selling out if it's your brand. Nothing in here, just did that for the effect. Tonga, meaning south in many Polynesian languages, actually played a huge crucial role in developing much of the culture of Polynesia. And interestingly enough, Los Angeles does have a small Tongan community. I've actually met a few of them here, but all of them were not able to film with me as a co-host, so I'm just gonna have to do this episode by myself. One is the loneliest number whatever the song is. You know what I'm talking about. Political geography, you know the deal. We've done this. Now, we've covered many island nations on this channel, some cold, some hot, some administratively divided up into confusing secessionist groups with buffers and military bases, and each one brings a unique story that sets them apart. Let's look at the location on the globe, shallst we? First of all, the country is located in the South Pacific Ocean, part of Oceania, scaled down to the subregion known as Polynesia, which stretches in a triangle from New Zealand to Hawaii to Easter Island. The country lies just on the international date line, awkwardly shifted to the +13 time zone, meaning that with the line islands of Kiribati, they are some of the first people to see a new day on Earth, and they are an entire day ahead of their neighbors, American Samoa and Niue, which lie at -11 UTC. The country has about 170 islands spanning across 270 square miles, stretching about 500 miles north to south. Despite all that oceanic space, the country only makes up about 290 square miles in actual land area, which is just barely larger than the total size of Singapore. About 50 of the islands are inhabited, and about 70% of the entire population lives on the main island, Tongatapu. Here, you can find the capital, Nuku'alofa, as well as the largest and busiest airport, Fua'amotu International. Here, of course, you can also find the busiest port, the port of Nuku'alofa, the only deep water port in the country servicing both cargo and passenger services for those that do not wish to fly. Due to the higher tourism sector, the only other international airport with a single flight servicing Fiji would be Vava'u's Lulapa'u Airport up north. Here, you can also find the second largest town, Neafu, just south of the airport. The country is divided into 5 administrative divisions: Tongatapu, Eua, Ha'apai, Vava'u, and the Niue Islands furthest up north, which are actually managed by Nuku'alofa down south, as the entire division only has less than 2,000 people. Finally, see this island? No, not Ata Island, where 6 shipwrecked Tongan teenagers survived for 15 months and they made a documentary on it. A little further southwest, these little guys, the Minerva Reefs. They are a partially submerged volcanic seamount, and if you are intrepid enough, you can actually travel to them and stand on them at low tide. Anyway, there's an interesting story behind them. Let's stop the animation and explain back in the studio, shall we? Yeah, so going off of that, these two little specks have a weird back and forth backstory. Kinda goes like this.
I'm a rich American, and I'm gonna claim this Terra Nullis as my own. And I'm gonna build a tower, reclaim the land, create a currency, and make myself the president!
Nope, get out. I'm annexing these guys. I'm naming them, I'm gonna build some navigation lights, and I'm gonna raise my f***ing flag, man.
I mean, we'll agree that you might be the only possible owner, but we won't officially recognize your sovereign claim.
Okay, no. These islands are not yours and cannot be under the UNCLOS agreements, as they are partially submerged reefs.
Okay, you know what? Let's settle this. How about I give you the Minerva Reefs in exchange for the Lau Islands? Many of our people have ancestors and relatives on those islands.
Okay, so you want me to give you all of this for these 2 reefs?
Yes.
Kind of an interesting negotiation tactic, but hey, Tonga just doesn't back down. What it comes down to is Tonga is the only country in the Pacific that has never been colonized. They were under British protectorate status and they signed many agreements with them, but the royal family still had full control over the nation. Which actually leads us to the other thing. Tonga is the only indigenous monarchy-ruled country in Oceania, with Tupu VI as the current king, coronated in 2015. Tongan royalty actually goes back way further to the 10th century, with about 35 other monarchs having taken the throne, this guy being the first king. In addition, there are also 33 noble families that head their respective villages across Tonga. Now, here's where it gets a little more complicated though. In 2006, the Nuku'alofa riots occurred. It was a democracy movement led by the HRDM. This incident is a heavy topic if you bring it up to Tongan people, and you will hear lots of opinions on it. We are here to just tell you it happened, not here to lead you on how to think about it. Stepping on thin ice is my job. Woo! Moving on. Tongan tradition actually goes back thousands of years, some say as early as the Lapita culture complex, starting at about 1500 to 1000 BC. Over time, they built up the Tui Tonga thalassocracy, a fancy word that basically just means a maritime empire. The empire spread to neighboring islands like Samoa and Niue, and the influence realm stretched far across the Pacific to parts of what are now Melanesia and Micronesia. Some say even Hawaii, as their languages have similarities, but I'll leave that up to you guys, the Hawaiian geography peeps, to debate in the comments. Moving on. See, when you live in an area in the world where land is scarce, you become really good at navigating the waters, and every little ounce of dry dirt matters. Needless to say, much of Polynesian history was like,
My boat's bigger.
you win. And that's basically how Tonga built their reputation at the time. First contact with the Europeans occurred in the 1600s with the Dutch, later other noteworthy explorers like James Cook and Francisco Morel de la Rua. Fun fact, when James Cook came by, it was like,
Wow, you guys are so friendly, making me a feast. I'm gonna call you guys the Friendly Islands. The Friendly Islands, that's what I'm gonna call you.
Okumaloto ke te mati I koe. Pea kai ha'asi hovaka.
at least this is according to the account. We'll never know exactly what went down, but yeah. In any case, if by any chance you decide to visit Tonga, here are some of the top notable places you might be interested in seeing. Tuku'aho Memorial Museum, the National Museum, the Ha'amonga a Maui, Ene'io Botanical Gardens, Talamahu Market, the Royal Palace and Tombs, Anahulu Cave Underground Swimming Pool, the Three-Headed Coconut Tree, the Hufangalupe Natural Bridge, the ruins of Mu'a, and there are so many churches of so many different denominations. Here are just some of the top ones that I found. And of course, stepping into the country, you'll immediately notice the tropical atmosphere in itself is a notable sight. Let's jump into the natural side of Tonga now, shallst we? Now, as we mentioned, unless you are New Zealand, most Polynesian countries and territories have to adapt to the incredible lack of land. Every piece of solid ground matters with Tonga, and things get a little interesting when they live in a place that's constantly making new land. Let's explain in the animation. For one, Tonga lies on the southernmost volcanic area on Earth, the Ring of Fire, that borders the Pacific. Even more specific, they are right at the hook-shaped loop known as the Tonga Trench and the Tonga Ridge, sandwiched between the Lau Basin and the Lau Ridge that reaches Fiji. The Tonga Trench is the second deepest in the world after the Mariana Trench and is one of the fastest subduction zones on Earth, meaning the Pacific Plate is going under the Australian Plate, westward into the trench. Within the Lau Basin lies the mini fault line, the Tofua Arc Volcanic Front, which essentially makes up the entire western part of Tonga's country. This is the most volcanic area of Tonga, where nearly all the active volcanoes lie, both above and below the ocean, whereas the eastern part is mostly made up of raised coral and limestone islands. The west is also where you can find the tallest point, the peak of the uninhabited Kau Island. And speaking of which, the largest inland body of water is Vailahi, a crater lake in the northernmost island, Nuafo'u, which the entire island in itself is actually just the caldera of an otherwise submerged volcano. Some islands keep appearing and disappearing due to the high volcanic activity, like Fonaufo'u. This empty spot in the ocean once had an island over 145 meters tall and 6 kilometers in diameter, but the island recollapsed from another eruption in the late 40s and resubmerged underwater. Recently, the Hongatonga Honga Ha'apai volcano has been doing essentially the same thing for decades. At one point, it looked like a new island would be formed, but then in January of 2022, a new eruption virtually destroyed the island, sending shockwaves across the world as far as Chile. It was kind of big. And finally, the country does experience cyclone season mostly between November to April, and overall enjoys a balmy annual average temperature around 70-75 degrees Fahrenheit, 21-25 Celsius. Yes, the volcanic eruption was a huge deal shortly after tsunami waves were actually recorded as far away as Chile. In any case, Tonga doesn't have any major rivers. There are only small creeks and streams, mostly on Niu Tupatapu and Eua Island. Most people get their fresh water from rainwater collection or extracted from the porous limestone underground. Also, don't go wandering around on any beach. Ask the locals where it is safe to swim, because there are many sharp coral reefs under the waters as well as riptide zones. You could get caught in a dangerous situation.
Don't die from ignorance from all your surroundings.
Thank you, Hannah. Your words are so true. Tonga's islands are, no shocker, loaded with so much natural wonder. Everything from the Mapua Vaea blowholes that can shoot water up at least 30 meters in the air.
Mine are better.
Yeah, no competition. In any case, it's a refreshing sight. And speaking of refreshing, it's time for my triple shot espresso break, which means Noah is back and he's ready to rock the rest of the physical geography segment. Noah, take it away.
I have returned yet again. Come to me, Mjolnir. Roller coaster.
You don't say no.
The killer queen you are.
That was a good warm-up.
It was fantastic. Now, like most volcanic island nations, Tonga's soil is top-notch. About 1/4 of their land is arable, and about 50% is already permanently utilized for farming. Squash, coconuts, bananas, and vanilla are their main crops. Tonga is also known for being a great location for fishing skipjack tuna, which are heavily prized in Asian and Polynesian cuisine. It goes great in poke bowls, which are fantastic. Now, here's the complicated thing. Much of Tonga's economy is driven by remittance money sent from families abroad. This is partially because getting into the domestic private sector for citizens has been somewhat challenging. Most of the monetary sector and large-scale corporate activities are run by the royal family, such as telecommunications, electricity, and insurance. Tonga used to have a passport by investment system that produced a small wave of Chinese people to come in and dominate the small business sector. Eventually, it ended in 1998. We've talked about this before. Yeah, you can kind of do the math.
So here's your passport, but you swear you're gonna build a hotel?
Yeah.
This especially hit a hard note with Tongans, as by Tongan law, only Tongan citizens of Tongan bloodline can own land. It pushed a lot of ideas on where the country would be headed. Not beheaded, where the country would be headed eventually.
Grammar is fun.
Now they are trying to grow the tourism industry. Cruise ships often dock at Nuku'alofa and Vava'u. Overall, they intend to diversify their revenue streams as best they can, but you know, it's not super easy when you're a small guy locked in the middle of the ocean. Give it time though. Tahiti, Fiji, and Hawaii have proven it's possible.
Yeah, well, I mean, like 2 of those island chains are tied into larger global power entities, so would you say that?
That is a discussion we do not have time for. Moving on. Now, in the past few decades, Tonga has decided to section off plenty of their natural sites as they attempt to bolster their tourism sector. And to talk about nature, here's Gary Harlow.
All right, magic hat time. Gary Harlow. So, as a nation made up of more water than land, obviously Tonga's wildlife is more surf than turf. For one, Tonga is one of the best sites in the world to witness humpback whales. They migrate from the Antarctic waters to breed and give birth starting around June every year. Now, the waters might be beautiful and pristine, but don't be fooled, there are some critters that you need to watch out for. Sea snakes are common, as are poisonous cone snails, as well as the Pacific man-o'-war or blue bottle jellyfish, which is actually not a jellyfish, but a sinophore. They usually live in deep waters, so you probably won't see them on beaches very often. But if you do and you get stung, rinse the wound off with vinegar. Also, if you're lucky, look out for the 7-armed octopus. Technically it has 7 arms, so I guess that would make it a heptopus. But they don't call it a heptopus, they call it a 7-armed octopus. I don't make the rules of naming things. Nothing is bloody real in Tonga. Otherwise, Tonga is a bird haven. Everything can be found from the red shining parrot to the 2 endemic species, the Tongan whistler and Tongan megapode. The only native mammal of Tonga is the flying fox, and all belonging to the royal family. Thus, they are not allowed to be hunted or captured. And finally, check your shoes, because sometimes you might find a Molokai centipede in it. They like to burrow in shoes and can sting if you're not careful. Tropical islands with a little poison and a little danger, that's my type of vacation. With that, I'm out, and cheers, mates! Is Art doing his segment today? I'll just be him. Hey guys, I'm Art. Oh, sports.
Thank you, Gary. Crazy to think of how many species you can find in such limited land yet vast open waters. And also how many of those species they eat here. Seriously, Paul? You put that in the script? I mean, it's true, but man, it's kind of messed up, man.
Yeah, that is kind of messed up, but it is still true.
Well, with that, here's one of our geographies explaining about the food of Tonga.
A lot of our traditional food is cooked in an umu, or raised earth oven. This here is more of a modern example of an umu, where you light the fire and heat up the rocks. The rocks are heated enough, remove all the charcoal and wood. Of course, your meal is complete without a drink. Kava, the traditional drink in Tonga. We drink kava out of a kumete, just the kava bowl, and we use our coconut cups, which is like the kava equal.
So, Liam was not able to film the rest of the food segment, but I'll fill in for him. Like most island nations, they have a heavy emphasis on staples like taro, yams, bananas, coconuts, and of course, so many types of seafood can be found here. Coral grouper, octopus, lobster, mahi-mahi. There's even a fish called wahoo that they catch. Some common things you might find in Tongan cuisine include things like, apology for terrible pronunciation disclaimer, topai, ota ika, feke, lu, vaisiaine, kapisipulu, kalemoa, Ufiloloi. And Liam talked about the kava drink, but if that's not your thing, maybe otai is. It's a refreshing watermelon juice with citrus and coconut. Sounds like a pina colada, but with watermelon. Oh, I'm so down for that. Anyway, that's it for the food. Back to you, Noah, but then quickly back to me.
Well, thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Noah. Well, that was a mouthful, but our mouths are not full of words for this episode yet. That was a bad transition. You know what I mean. Demographics coming up. Let's go. Now, the motto of Tonga is, God and Tonga are my inheritance. As you'll soon find out, religion plays a huge role in Tongan society. After Christianity came in, when outsiders showed even the slightest hint of possibly colonizing them, it was like,
Hey! Our country belongs to God first. You wouldn't dare colonize something that belongs to God, would you?
well played. I mean, gotta give it to them. I mean, Tongans. And speaking of Tongans, here's the demographic graph. First of all, the country has about 110,000 people, yet there are more people of Tongan descent than Tonga living abroad in diaspora, estimated to be anywhere around 150 to 180-ish more Tongans. Within Tonga, though, the country is nearly completely homogenous at about 97% of the population identifying as ethnically Tongan. From there, about 1% identifies as partially Tongan, and the remaining 2% come from other groups, mostly other Polynesians, Asians, and Europeans. They use the pa'anga as their currency, they use the type I outlet, and they drive on the left side of the road. So the country actually has two languages that they use in documents and taught in school: Tongan, obviously, and English. The interesting thing is that the Tongan language actually has a different number system for different objects, like yams, coconuts, fish, so on. And also there are different words and phrases that people use when they are speaking to and/or referencing the crown, the kings, the royals, the nobles, and so on. Now, the Tongan language is written in the Latin script. However, the country also was known for having ancient petroglyph sites. This was kind of like the closest thing that they had to an illustrated form of concept conveyance. But yeah, anyway, moving on. So with Tonga, you need to know that everything is about anga whakatonga, or the Tongan way. And usually it is centered around your kainga, or extended family. Tongans are very tight with their families. Many Tongan families keep a hohoko. It's where they record the names of their ancestors and descendants along with other information. And in Tonga, of course, there is a sense of societal rank based on your family's prestige. And nothing exemplifies this more than whakaapa-apa, or showing respect, which is a huge deal here. Nearly everyone knows everyone, and everyone knows everybody's position in society. Now let's talk about religion. Tonga's constitution allows freedom of religion. However, the vast majority of the country are ardent church-going Christians from quite a few denominations. The Free Wesleyan Church is the largest denomination, holding about 1/3 of the country's population. However, interestingly enough, Tonga is the most Mormon country on earth. The exact numbers and reports are a little interesting because about 18.5% of the country will say that they self-identify as Mormon when asked, which is already a pretty high number for an entire country's population. But the church claims that about 60% of the country at least has their names in the Mormon Church registry, meaning that at some point 60% of the people have been in some way associated with the LDS Church. Regardless, the whole country tends to lean more on the socially conservative side, even in public dress. Technically, it's illegal to go shirtless in public, and most adults avoid wearing shorts. It's interesting. It's like a tropical country. You would think they would be all like shorts and bikinis. Nope. Tonga likes to cover up a little bit more. In any case, one more thing you need to know about the country is that they do kind of have a little bit of a health issue. About 90% of the country is considered overweight, and about 70% are categorically obese. Around 1/3 to 40% of the country has type 2 diabetes. Regardless of the health issues, Tongans really love their athletics. To talk more about that, here is Art with the sports part.
Hey guys, according to Caleb, I sound like this. I do not sound like that.
Most of the time.
All right. Tonga, another Polynesian country, which means you can probably guess where things are heading. We learned about the haka. Remember the haka dance in the New Zealand episode? But did you know that Tonga has their own version called the sipi tau? The war chant performance is done at all events, from weddings to funerals. However, none more prevalent than sporting events. Nothing more exciting than watching a match against New Zealand in anything, because the two war chants kind of have like a face-off. It's the haka versus the sipi tau, and it's freaking awesome. War chanting. Now, like their neighbors, Tonga seems to enjoy participating in sports that involve strength and body mass. Kind of like me. It's all I got, otherwise I'm worthless. Right, Paul?
Yeah, you're worthless.
We're both worthless. Oh, I'm so insecure. That's why I have a big body. Okay. Many athletes excel in sports like weightlifting, judo, even sumo wrestling. There's a lot of Tongans in the WWE and in like wrestling events, kind of like The Rock was and his father. Their one Olympic medal, though, came from boxer Paea Wolfgram. The most famous Olympian, though, would have to be Taekwondo competitor Pita Taufatofua. He broke the rules and went shirtless in the 2016 Rio Olympics opening ceremony. Despite not making it past the first round, he still became an internet sensation. Like their cousins, the Samoans, Tongans are highly valued during draft season for American football and Australian rules football. Many NFL Super Bowl winning teams have included Tongan players. Otherwise, there is no question rugby is their national sport. So many famous Tongan athletes are known worldwide in the world of rugby. Here are some, just to name a few right here. Their National Rugby League team has competed 5 times in the Rugby League World Cup since 1995. Due to their constantly improving performance, the IRL has ranked Tongan's national team number 3 in the world as of 2021. Tonga's got it. Keep an eye on them, baby. Some say Tongans are so good at rugby because they traditionally played kasavaki, or underwater rugby. Basically, the goal of the game is to transfer a massive heavy stone from one goal to another while underwater. Contestants in the past sometimes drowned and died while playing, however, it was part of their history. And that's all I got for you guys. So to take off the next segment,
It's the real art.
the real art.
Thank you, Art. One quick little side note, Tonga does kind of have a unique way how they do things socially. The genders are quite segregated in daily life. Unless you are married, most boys and girls stay separate even amongst siblings. They don't eat each other's food. They don't like interact as much. It's been said to me, no matter how tough you think a guy is, he will straighten up real fast once a mother, sister, or auntie beckons to him. Matriarchal society. To talk a little bit more about the culture and stuff like that here is Random Hannah.
Your favorite co-host is back. Is this Mike? Is this on? Now, even though men get inheritance rights and surnames are passed down from fathers, traditionally, Tongan culture has a deep matrilineal core. At a young age, brothers are considered subordinate to their sisters. I was the oldest of 5 kids, I know how that goes. And the eldest daughter is expected to be the leader of the siblings, even if she is younger than her brother. Later, when boys grow up, they are obligated to help and provide for their sisters, even when they have their own families. In family structures, the highest ranking member, or fahu, is usually considered the paternal aunt, who facilitates family affairs, like naming children, and acts as like a godparent to all. The way it's seen is like women take care of the inside of the house and men outside. So in a way, men get material honor and women get rank honor. Speaking of women, one thing you'll see them doing a lot is hiko, where they juggle tui nuts. Sometimes they can go to 4 or 5 at a time. This is very unique just to Tonga. Other Polynesian countries don't have this. Men and women might wear their own versions of tupanu cloth, usually reaching the knees or longer. Occasionally, you might see a kia or string skirt. Often you'll see tauvala. Essentially, these are mats that they wrap around their waist, and it is usually done for respect. During a funeral, you do not do your hair or your makeup or jewelry or anything because you are in mourning. And in every household, you will find fala and natu mats. These are given as gifts at every occasion: funerals, weddings, births. Sunday, everything shuts down, and by law, all businesses that are not essential have to close, and even sports are discouraged. Traditionally, like many of their Polynesian cousins, tattoos used to be part of their culture, usually reserved for people of more notable social status. Each tattoo symbolizes either a family line or a life achievement. For a long time, the practice was looked down upon. However, recently the practice has been revived, especially amongst the youth. The oldest tattooing kit in the world was found in Tonga, aged at around 3,000 years old. And finally, there are so many national holidays and festivals celebrated amongst the people of Tonga. And of course, music is a huge part of all these events, which means, Keith.
What's up, everybody? It's Keith. I am here to present the wonderful music segment. Traditional Tongan music is mostly made up of vocals and wooden instruments, such as, please forgive me for the terrible pronunciation, the nafa, or slit drum, the lolly, or slit wooden gong. Sometimes these are used for churches as the church bells. Nose flute, this dude right here, famous for the nose flute. Now, there are many different versions of traditional dance performed on different islands, like like these here. It was a way they recorded history. One dance that every Tongan will know, the war dance. It was a heavy, fast-paced drum beat followed by loud chanting, stomping, and weapons. Who doesn't love weapons? Women also have the hula dance. It's like the Tongan version of the hula, like Hawaii. So I'm sure people would get up and dance like this. They were all dancing like this. Long story short, dance is huge here. In any case, modern contemporary elements have crept their way into Tongan music with the introduction of Western instruments like the guitar and piano. Many Tongans abroad or people with partial Tongan descent have become notable in the music industry. Every Tongan will mention the Wolfgram family, and recently the Tongan sisters have really put Tonga on the map after they've been featured on Nickelodeon and various talk shows. Tonga has proven the world that they have talent. Alright, that's it for me. By the way, everybody, I know last time I had mentioned that I started my own YouTube channel, so woohoo, I did. The Keith Everett Show. It should pop up now. You know, thank you all so much for watching, and that's it for me. Stay cool, guys. Woo!
Oh, why thank you, Keith. Woo! Well, this has been a heavy segment of the episode, but we are not done. Tonga has a way how they interact with the rest of the world, and let's discuss that now. Shallistith we. Now, as you can kind of see, Tonga played a huge role in influencing much of the Pacific. Not only that, but as time went on, they were able to not only maintain their sovereignty amongst colonial powers, but negotiate and interact with the outside as well. Here's the motion graphic. First of all, out of all countries, Tonga's longest formal relations have been with the UK, dating back to 1879, shortly after they established their constitutional monarchy. And in 1900, they signed a treaty of friendship, otherwise the protectorate status. This in return opened up the possibility for Tonga to extend relations to other nations in the Commonwealth and Anglophone realm, such as Australia and New Zealand. New Zealand actually having the largest Tongan community in diaspora at somewhere around 83,000. Tongans are culturally closer to Australia and New Zealand. They have adapted many of the cultural tropes, including sports, and even some of the accent. The USA, however, actually has the second largest population of Tongans outside of Tonga at somewhere around 63,000, mostly living in either Hawaii, California, or Utah, which of course is where most of the Mormon Tongans live. Now, as a Pacific Island nation, China has been of course reaching out in the past few decades. There was a moment of tension in 2006 when Chinese merchants were targeted during the Nuku'alofa riots and work visas were not renewed. This resulted in some Chinese Tongans migrating back to China, decreasing the Chinese population, but over time relations got better, and even the former king visited China in 2008, reassuring relations could continue. When it comes to their best friends, however, you have to look at their immediate neighbors in the Pacific. Tonga is part of numerous Pacific IGOs like the Pacific Islands Forum, the Secretariat of Pacific Community, and the Polynesian Leaders Group. Fiji has always been close and holds many of the High Commission offices or consulates representing Tonga for other countries within their country. When it comes to their best friends, however, nearly all Tongans I have talked to have said the same people, Samoa. Samoans, both in the country of Samoa and American Samoa, share a deep-rooted culture and history with Tonga. Both countries are essentially stemmed from the same ancestors thousands of years ago. Both were part of each other's empires. Otherwise, many of their royalty and nobles have married each other, and some share both Samoan and Tongan ancestry. Overall, one could argue that Samoa and Tonga get each other the best out of all the Polynesian countries, and when they meet, it's always a joy. In conclusion, God, I wish I had a Tongan person here to do it, but I guess I have to. From what it seems, Tonga is a nation that had such a huge significant role in the Pacific. You don't build an empire on water very easily, and they somehow did it. But you know, hey, if this video made you a little interested, maybe you should Tongo there. Let's cut to a clip out of sequence with my mom hitting me with a hammer. Oh, there you go. Trinidad and Tobago is coming up next. Stay tuned.